That innocent bedtime story about Little Red Riding Hood? Everything you think you know is wrong. Behind the pages of this children's tale lies a truth so dark, it's been carefully hidden for centuries. A truth about human nature that's just as relevant today as it was hundreds of years ago. Have you ever wondered why parents still tell their children about a young girl, a dark forest, and a wolf that's far more cunning than he appears? What if I told you this isn't just a simple story about following your parents' rules? Behind this seemingly innocent fairy tale lies a web of hidden meanings, ancient warnings, and dark truths that have been carefully disguised through generations. The wolf you think you know, the one who dresses as a grandmother and speaks with honeyed words, represents something far more unsettling, something that still exists in our world today. This isn't just about a big bad wolf. It's about the masks people wear and the dangers that hide behind friendly faces. Before we venture down this dark path, ask yourself, why has this particular story survived for hundreds of years? Why do we still warn our children about talking to strangers through the metaphor of a wolf in grandmother's clothing? Long before Disney and modern fairy tales, stories were passed down through generations as warnings, not entertainment. In medieval Europe, where dangers lurked around every corner, parents needed ways to prepare their children for life's harsh realities without frightening them too severely. The earliest known printed version of Little Red Riding Hood appeared in 1697, when Charles Perrault first put pen to paper, but the oral tradition stretches back much further. In those days, the forests of Europe were genuinely dangerous places. Wolves weren't just story creatures, they were real threats to villages and travelers alike. But the wolf in this tale is different. He doesn't simply attack. He thinks, he plans, he deceives. He uses words instead of claws, manipulation instead of brute force. This distinction is crucial because it reveals the story's true purpose, teaching children that danger doesn't always look dangerous. The story evolved differently across Europe, each region adding its own layers of meaning. In France, the red hood symbolized protection and guidance, a precious gift meant to keep its wearer safe. German storytellers emphasized the importance of staying on the proper path, warning of the consequences of disobedience. Eastern European versions taught children to trust their instincts, to recognize when something felt wrong, even if they couldn't explain why. The color red itself carries deep significance. In medieval times, red dye was expensive, a luxury reserved for nobility and special occasions. A red hood would have been precious, something to be protected and respected. But it also made the wearer stand out, visible, noticeable, memorable. Just like the story itself, the red hood needed to be unforgettable to serve its purpose. But there's something about the wolf that most people miss entirely, something that changes the whole meaning of the story. Before I reveal this hidden truth, we need to understand how medieval storytelling worked. These weren't simple tales to entertain children by the firelight. They were elaborate codes, carefully crafted warnings passed down through generations, designed to teach without terrifying. Think about it. Why would a wolf speak? Why would it disguise itself instead of simply attacking? The answer reveals something far more sophisticated than a mere forest predator. In medieval society, the wolf embodied something everyone understood, but few dared to name directly: the danger of manipulation. This wasn't about physical strength, it was about cunning, about using words and charm as weapons. During medieval times, society was strictly hierarchical. Power flowed from top to bottom, and those at the top weren't always worthy of their authority. The wolf, dressed in grandmother's clothes, represents this corruption of trust, someone using a respected position to cause harm. It's in the way he operates, gathering information through seemingly innocent questions, using that knowledge to set a trap, and disguising himself as someone trustworthy. These same patterns emerge today, just wearing different disguises. From sophisticated scams to false identities online, modern wolves still hunt with words rather than teeth, still pretend to be something they're not. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. The version you know, the one with the happy ending. That's not the original at all. Charles Perrault's first written version ended very differently, and its meaning was far more sinister. In Perrault's tale, there was no woodcutter, no rescue, no happy ending. The story ended with the wolf's victory, a stark warning about the consequences of misplaced trust. The message wasn't sugar-coated. Not all stories have happy endings, and not all dangers can be undone. When the Brothers Grimm rewrote the tale a century later, they added the heroic woodcutter. This wasn't just a creative choice, it reflected a changing society. People needed hope, needed to believe that evil could be defeated, that help would come if you called for it. The woodcutter himself represents something profound, the power of community, of ordinary people standing up against those who abuse their power. He's not nobility, not a knight in shining armor, but a common man who does what's right. This edition transformed the story from a simple warning into something more complex, a tale about the importance of community protection, about how ordinary people can stand against those who abuse their power. In every version, though, one thing remains constant: the wolf's ability to deceive through false appearances. It's this element that has kept the story relevant for centuries, that makes it just as important today as it was hundreds of years ago. Today's world might seem far removed from dark forests and talking wolves, but the warnings hidden in Little Red Riding Hood are more relevant than ever. In fact, you probably encounter these wolves in sheep's clothing more often than you realize. Think about how we navigate the digital forest of social media. Every day, people present carefully crafted versions of themselves, wearing modern versions of grandmother's clothing. The path through the woods has become the internet, where straying from the safe route can lead to encounters with those who aren't what they seem. But the story's wisdom goes deeper than just stranger danger. It's about power dynamics that still exist in our society. The wolf's tactics, gaining trust, isolating his target, using a position of authority, these are patterns that repeat themselves in corporate scandals, trusted institutions, and even everyday relationships. Consider how the story's elements translate to modern life. The forest represents any unfamiliar territory where we might lose our way. The path isn't just a dirt trail anymore. It's the difference between safe and risky behavior. The red hood itself, once a symbol of protection, now represents anything that makes us stand out, makes us visible, makes us potential targets. What's truly fascinating is how children today instinctively understand these metaphors. They might not know why the wolf's questions make them uncomfortable, but they sense the danger in his friendly facade. It's the same instinct that makes us hesitate before accepting a too-good-to-be-true offer, or trusting an overly friendly stranger. The story has endured because its core truth remains unchanged. Appearances can deceive, and trust, once given, can be weaponized. But there's hope in the modern telling too. The woodcutter represents all those who watch out for others, from cybersecurity experts to community watchdogs, from investigative journalists to whistleblowers. Perhaps most importantly, the story teaches us about resilience. Little Red Riding Hood isn't just a victim. She's a survivor who learns from her experience. In many modern retellings, she's the one who outsmarts the wolf, showing that wisdom can overcome malicious intent. This is why parents still tell this story, why it still resonates in our digital age. It's not just about wolves or forests or little girls in red hoods. It's about learning to trust our instincts, to recognize manipulation, and to understand that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who speak the sweetest words. But there's another layer to this story that most people completely miss. One that explains why certain cultures changed or removed parts of the original tale entirely. In some versions, the wolf isn't defeated at all. In others, there are multiple wolves, each more cunning than the last. These variations aren't random. They reflect different societies' fears and warnings. In Nordic versions, the wolf represents the harsh wilderness itself, teaching children about surviving brutal winters and scarce resources. Japanese adaptations transform the wolf into a trickster spirit, focusing on the danger of being deceived by supernatural forces. Each culture shaped the wolf into their own worst fears, their own darkest threats. But here's what's truly chilling. As our society evolved, the wolf evolved with it. Modern retellings often portray the wolf as a charming, sophisticated character. This isn't just a storytelling choice. It's a reflection of how modern dangers operate. Today's threats don't growl or bare their teeth. They smile. They charm. They friend request. The grandmother's house, once a symbol of safety, takes on new meaning in our world. It represents those places we consider secure. Our online accounts, our private information, our trusted circles. Just as the wolf infiltrated grandmother's house by mimicking her voice, modern predators infiltrate these spaces by mimicking trustworthy sources. Think about recent headlines. Major data breaches, sophisticated scams, trusted institutions revealed to be corrupt. Each one follows the wolf's playbook: gain trust, exploit weakness, abuse power. The story wasn't just warning us about strangers in the woods. It was teaching us about human nature itself. The basket of food Little Red carries represents something valuable too. Not just physical goods, but the information we carry, the data we share, the trust we extend. In medieval times, food was precious. Today, our personal information is the resource wolves hunt for. And the grandmother, she's not just a victim in the story. She represents wisdom, experience, protection. When the wolf impersonates her, he's not just changing his appearance. He's corrupting what should be a source of safety and guidance. This mirrors how modern threats often come disguised as helpful advice, exclusive opportunities, or urgent warnings. But perhaps most fascinating is how the color red itself has evolved in meaning. Once a symbol of privilege and visibility, red now represents both danger and power. In modern retellings, Little Red's hood isn't just a garment that makes her visible to predators. It's increasingly portrayed as a source of strength, a symbol of defiance against those who would do harm. But there's something even more intriguing about this story that historians have recently uncovered. The red hood itself wasn't just a random choice of clothing. It was a symbol of rebellion. In medieval times, wearing red was an act of defiance, especially for common folk. The church and nobility often tried to restrict certain colors to the upper classes through strict dress codes called sumptuary laws. So when we look deeper, Little Red Riding Hood isn't just a victim in this story. She's wearing the color of resistance. She's breaking social rules just by walking through that forest in her bright red hood. This adds another layer to why the wolf, often representing authority, is so interested in her. Think about the grandmother's location. Why does she live deep in the woods, separated from the village? In many European regions during this period, wise women and healers were forced to live on the outskirts of society. They were seen as threatening to established power structures. The path through the woods wasn't just a physical journey. It was a connection to this alternative source of wisdom and power. The wolf's questions to Little Red take on new meaning in this context. Where are you going? What's in your basket? Where does your grandmother live? These aren't just the curious inquiries of a predator. They're the questions of authority trying to control and monitor the movement of common people. The wolf wants to know who's breaking social boundaries, who's carrying unauthorized goods, who's maintaining connections with those living outside approved society. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. In some of the earliest oral versions of the tale, Little Red doesn't just survive. She outwits the wolf on her own. No woodcutter, no male savior, no external help. She recognizes the danger herself and cleverly escapes using her own intelligence. These versions were largely suppressed during the Victorian era, when there was a push to make fairy tales more appropriate and emphasize female helplessness. The story also contains hidden references to resistance against oppressive systems. The basket of food represents more than just supplies. It's about maintaining underground networks of support, about helping those who've been pushed to the margins of society. When the wolf tries to intercept this delivery, he's not just trying to trap Little Red. He's attempting to break these hidden support networks. And that famous line, "What big eyes you have," it's not just about recognition. It's about seeing through disguises, about identifying those who abuse power even when they wear the mask of legitimate authority. Each physical feature Little Red questions represents a different aspect of power. Eyes that watch and control, ears that listen for dissent, teeth that devour resistance. But before we unravel more of these hidden meanings, let's talk about the forest itself, because it's far more than just a backdrop. Medieval forests weren't just wild places, they were contested spaces, existing between the rigid order of villages and the untamed wilderness. They represented a kind of freedom that made authorities nervous. The forest in Little Red Riding Hood is what scholars call a liminal space, a place between places where normal rules don't quite apply. This is why so many crucial fairy tale moments happen in forests. It's where transformations occur, where identities can shift, where the established order can be challenged. When Little Red steps into that forest, she's not just taking a walk, she's entering a space where anything is possible, for better or worse. The wolf can speak like a human. A peasant woodcutter can challenge and defeat a powerful predator. A young girl can discover her own strength. But here's what makes this particular forest unique. It has a path. That path represents society's attempt to control even wild spaces, to create safe routes through dangerous territory. When the wolf suggests straying from the path to pick flowers, he's not just creating a diversion. He's tempting Little Red to break social conventions, to step outside the boundaries set by authority. And those flowers? They're not just pretty distractions. In medieval symbolism, flowers often represented forbidden knowledge or pleasures that society deemed dangerous. When Little Red stops to pick them, she's not just being disobedient, she's claiming her right to make her own choices, to pursue her own interests, even if they're not sanctioned by authority. The timing of her journey is significant too. Most versions specify that this takes place during the day, yet the forest is still dark and dangerous. This contradiction hints at a deeper truth. That danger doesn't wait for darkness, that threats can exist even in seemingly safe circumstances. The wolf's ability to operate in broad daylight suggests he has society's implicit permission. He's not hiding from authority because in many ways he represents it. Consider the moment when Little Red first meets the wolf. He doesn't immediately attack. Instead, he engages in conversation, demonstrates knowledge of social norms, presents himself as a legitimate part of the forest's ecosystem. This mirrors how real power structures operate. They don't always appear threatening at first. They present themselves as natural, inevitable, part of the proper order of things. The wolf's knowledge of the grandmother's house location suggests something even more disturbing. He's familiar with this territory, these relationships, these patterns of behavior. He's not an outsider. He's part of the system, using his insider knowledge to maintain control. So what is the real truth behind Little Red Riding Hood? It's not just one truth, but many, layered like shadows in that famous forest. This story has survived centuries, not because it's a simple tale about a wolf and a girl, but because it's a mirror reflecting humanity's darkest truths back at us. The wolf isn't just a wolf. He's every system of power that pretends to protect while actually preying on those it claims to guard. The red hood isn't just a piece of clothing. It's a symbol of defiance, of visibility in a world that often demands compliance and invisibility. And that forest path? It's the illusion of safety we create, knowing full well that the real world doesn't follow our carefully marked trails. But perhaps the most chilling truth is this. We are all Little Red Riding Hood, walking through our own forests, carrying our own baskets of precious cargo, trying to tell the difference between protectors and predators. The story endures because its warning is eternal. Power can wear a friendly face, authority can be corrupted, and sometimes the most dangerous wolves are the ones we've invited into our own homes. Yet there's hope in this dark tale. Whether it's the clever girl who outwits the wolf herself, or the community that comes together to protect its own, the story reminds us that resistance is possible, that even in the darkest forest, there are paths to survival, if we're wise enough to recognize them. Next time you hear someone dismiss Little Red Riding Hood as just a children's story, remember what you've learned today. Remember that our ancestors weren't just entertaining their children, they were arming them with coded warnings that remain surprisingly relevant. If you found this hidden history fascinating, you'll want to see our next video about the disturbing origins of Sleeping Beauty. Because that curse wasn't what you think it was, and the true story is even darker than this one. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. And let me know in the comments, What other fairy tales are you curious about? What dark truths might be hiding in their shadows? Because remember, the most powerful stories aren't just stories. They're warnings, wrapped in metaphors, passed down through generations, waiting for us to finally understand their true meaning